Alright, so here's the full disassembly of the KWA 1911 Mark II. In this disassembly video, I'm going to go into the barrel, the cylinder, and go into the full trigger mechanism as well. First step, the basic field strip. After the gun's been cleared, magazine's been dropped out, you're going to line up the disassembly lever with a small notch on the slide. Push it out. Slide should come out. Everything else comes straight off, just like that. Go ahead and put the lower portion aside for now. On the front of the slide, you'll see a small lever that can be pushed in. You can twist this upper portion counterclockwise to let that out and pull out the spring. Spring guide can also just come straight off. And once you've done with that, you can go ahead and pull the portion keeping in the spring. After that, the whole barrel should slide out, and this is pretty much as far as you need to go if you want to just clean the gun. Alright, so here's how to get into the cylinder assembly of the KWA 1911. You're going to need an Allen wrench. Go ahead and unscrew that screw on the bottom of the cylinder assembly. Screw should come out just like that. Next step, you're going to go ahead, push in the fake firing pin on the back of the gun. And after that's been done, there's two kind of prongs that come out to hold the cylinder in place. I usually take a pair of pliers, squish those prongs in, and the cylinder assembly should come out just like that. I also had the fake firing pin come out. You can go ahead and set that aside for later. Now that that's been disassembled, you have left is the cylinder assembly. It's all pretty easy from here. You can go ahead and disengage the cylinder return springs, and the cylinder will come off just like that. Now to get inside the jet nozzle, you're going to need a small punch of some sort, and you're going to punch out the small pin in the cylinder. Just like this. Pin comes out the other side. Keep your finger there, so because there's a spring inside, you don't want anything shooting out. Go ahead and get that jet nozzle out, as well as the spring. And it's going to sit inside the gun, just like this. Alright, now to go ahead and reassemble the cylinder assembly for the 1911. Now it's going to sit in the gun just like this. Go ahead and put the spring plus jet nozzle inside and use something to hold the jet nozzle down with. And you're going to take that pin you had earlier, put it back in the hole from which it came, and line it up with the other side and make sure it pushes right on through just like this. Alright, now that the jet nozzle's been properly installed back into the cylinder, you're going to line it back up with the O-ring on there and place the cylinder return springs back onto the cylinder. It might take me a little while to do this. Kind of just requires a little finesse. Just like that. Now when you got them on there correctly, you can pull the cylinder out a bit and it should snap right back into place. Alright, now to put the cylinder assembly back into the slide, make sure the small portion of the fake firing pin goes back into this hole with the skinnier end facing out. And this hole you see in the firing pin is where the screw is going to go through. So make sure you have, you can see that screw. There is a small spring in there, so make sure you still have that spring if you want your firing pin to be able to come back out later. Now you can go ahead and drop the whole cylinder assembly back into the slide. Just be a little bit careful when you do this and squeeze those prongs to make sure you get a nice fit. Line up the fake firing pin back into the hole where it came from, and you can go ahead and squeeze those prongs back in if you want, just to make sure they don't interfere with anything down the line. Now that it's seated fully back into place with the firing pin poking out the hole in the rear of the slide, you can go ahead and put that screw in. Remember to keep those, line up that firing pin with the screw, so if you have to rotate the firing pin a little bit for the screw to set in, you might have to do so. Sometimes if you're having a little trouble getting it to fit in, just rotate the firing pin. You're going to have to push in a little bit as well. But once you get it lined up, you can just go ahead and tighten that screw. And there you go. Slide's just working fine perfectly. Alright, now onto the harder stuff. This portion has a couple of small parts you're going to have to worry about. Springs shooting out, things like that. A couple things to note is make sure you watch this small plunger on the side of the safety. There's a possibility that can always shoot out. You also have the firing pin, the real firing pin, not the fake one that's on the actual slide. The real firing pin of the 1911 is this small thing sticking out right there. That has a tendency to fall out, and if your gun ends up not shooting a lot, that's usually the problem. But first things first, there's a small pin on the very bottom corner. You're going to want to go ahead and push that out and slowly let it down. You don't want that shooting out. Next thing is there's a small leaf spring inside. You can kind of take that leaf spring out the bottom, just like that. This thing's a bit complicated, and we'll have to worry with that down the line. So after the leaf spring's been taken out, go ahead and engage the safety just to put a little bit less pressure on that plunger spring. And you got to kind of get a flathead screwdriver. I always kind of wiggle it out, putting it behind, slowly lifting up, being a little bit gentle. Safety should come out just like that. Put that aside, and it should come straight out the other end after rotating it a bit. You're going to want to rotate it counterclockwise and then pull out. Now that the safety's been taken out, you can take out the beaver tail safety or grip safety, whatever you want to call that, and put that aside and take out that small pin right there. Once that pin's taken out, hammer should fall loose. Really easy. As I said before, ensure that your safety plunger is still around. Just like that. You don't want that shooting out on you, or else your safety is going to be real floppy and it won't work so well. So now, to get to the trigger block, take a Phillips head screwdriver and unscrew the Phillips screw you see kind of towards the middle of the frame here, or the lower portion of the gun, and let that screw fall out and put that aside. And you also have a small pin. Go ahead and push that pin in. Pin comes out the other side, and the trigger block assembly should just lift out just like this. Alright, so after you're done, you've replaced whatever it is in the trigger block assembly. Usually when I first got this gun, that firing pin fell out and I had to take this apart to reassemble that. First things first, I'm going to take the lower frame, drop the trigger assembly right back in. Now you want to be a little careful here and always keep an eye out, make sure that safety, or the firing pin I mean, is always sticking out with the striker hammer pushed up to keep that firing pin in. Once the trigger block's been put in, you can throw the first small pin, or the last small pin you took out that goes through there, into the gun to keep this staying still. You can also go ahead and put this screw back in as well. Tighten that screw up, and the whole trigger block should be firmly set in place. Now here comes the hard part. Here's the order I like to do it in. This is the hardest part of putting this thing together, this spring. It's important to note, let me see if I can get it under better light. You're going to have this thing set up like this. Ensure that the far left is down all the way. Far right is also down. Try not to put any pressure on that because you might activate and you'll lose the firing pin there. And rotate that up as much as you can. With your other finger, push up on that so it doesn't slide down. I'll also make sure to include a little pictures of the final product once it's all done. Just like that. Now take your leaf spring, and it has to go on a certain way or else your gun's not going to function correctly. It needs the left prong of the leaf spring, it needs to be pushing up against the left part right there. And the second part from the left needs to set itself up against the block you see in the middle portion of the trigger block right there, right above my finger. And last, the third portion needs to also be pushing up against the far right portion of the trigger block. So it should sit in just like that. I go ahead to keep the leaf spring from falling out. I take the bottom portion of the grip and just kind of slide it in there temporarily for now, just to keep everything under pressure and working fine. Now that you have your leaf spring in there correctly, go ahead and first take the hammer and line it up with the hole it originally went in and put that pin right through it. Just like that. Now you can kind of test out the hammer a little bit to make sure everything's working. If you push up on the hammer, it shouldn't go forward. If your hammer is moving forward without locking in place, trying to engage that firing pin right there, you're going to have problems later on. So once that's been put in place, you can going to have to lower the end of the grip right there and put the beaver tail safety in. I'm going to put the beaver tail safety in. Go ahead and just line it up. Line it up with the holes, and also make sure you line it up with the metal portion sticking out of the hammer. And go ahead and gotta find where I put the pins at. Oh, that's right, it's a safety. Go ahead and for now, put this safety into the gun just to hold it in place, and push up on that bottom portion and put the final pin in the gun. Just like that. Kind of requires a little finesse, but it's not too bad to get done. And now it's important to test and make sure that the hammer is set correctly, so you know you're setting it together. Kind of hold the hammer back and release the trigger. Your hammer should stop at the half cock before it even starts pushing down the firing pin. And when you pull it back, it should lock into place just like that. If it doesn't work like that, your gun's not going to function when you put it all back together. So now that the leaf spring has been inserted in correctly, go ahead and take the other portion of the safety and put it back into place. You're going to have to take a small screwdriver or something and push that plunger in until your safety can go where it needs to go. Might have to wiggle it around a bit. I know I have to. Just like that. Safety should sit flush against the lower receiver. And you know it's your plunger is in correctly and your safety kind of clicks into place and it doesn't want to fall down when you have the safety up. And then all you got to do from here is put the gun back together. It's fairly simple. Take the slide, your guide rod, your barrel, drop everything in and line it up. Guide rod, spring, there you go. That's how the slide should look when it's fully put together correctly. Go ahead and line it up. Put it back on the gun and line up that small notch you see so you can put the takedown lever back in. Give it a quick functions check, make sure everything works good. And there you go. 1911 fully disassembled and reassembled.